Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Bharat Varta podcast. Today, we're going to be taking you on a tour of India with a couple of expert travelers. I'm going to be talking to Anuradha Goel and Karan Karyappa about cultural travel and tourism in India. Anuradha ji started Indie Tales, which is an award-winning blog in 2002. She's traveled to 18 countries and she's traveled to the nooks and corners of India. She quit her IT job to begin this journey quite literally and is today an author and a speaker. Thank you so much for joining us, Anuradha ji.
Namaste and happy to be on Bharat Varta.
Fantastic. Karan is the co-founder of GoMogli, a travel startup, which is India's first flexible bus network for travelers. So you can literally hop on, hop off the bus at any place with the GoMogli pass. They also curate very rich travel experiences within Karnataka, Kerala, and Goa. Thanks for being here, Karan.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, so nice to connect with you guys. All right, we have plenty to discuss. Let me begin with you, Anuradha ji. Could you paint us a picture of what cultural travel and tourism in India looks like?
So, to me, culture tourism or the showcase of India's culture should be the cornerstone of India's tourism. If you go out and ask what is India to somebody who hasn't visited it yet, and the answer you're going to get is culture and spirituality primarily. There is a lot of diversity. There is a lot of nature. There is a lot of jungles, mountains, deserts, rivers, oceans. Everything is there. But the cornerstone of India is culture, something that makes us stand apart from the rest of the world. The longest living civilization, and so many cultural markers of the past that are coexisting with our present. So if we do not leverage it for our tourism, if we do not showcase it to the world, I'll use my favorite term, which I always use, which is that India's tourism is like sitting on a gold mine with a begging bowl.
Right. Yeah. Not just to the world. Okay, I think
but to the Indians as well. Yes. And also we Indians need to start looking at India as Indians, A lot of times I feel when people from one part of the country travel to another part of the country, and I've lived in about 10 states of India and about 15 cities of this country. I can tell you, when people travel from one place to another, even in today's time and age where you can pretty much Google everything before you travel, people see it as theirs. They don't see it as ours. So that mindset change needs to come when it comes to domestic tourism. We need to start seeing all this as our own heritage built by our own ancestors, traditions, cultures, dance, music, everything. It is ours. We may not be introduced to it in our lifetimes, but it has all come down to us from our common ancestors.
So I completely agree with you. So much of our culture is entwined with the places, right? So intrinsically entwined, actually. How did your journey begin with Indie Tales and your decision to sort of be a reformed IT industry veteran?
Okay, so honestly, my travel journey began as soon as I was born, I guess. My father worked in the defense, so we lived in different parts of the country. I had a grandmother, my paternal grandmother, my dadi, who was an avid traveler, and she would tell me stories of all her travels. In fact, I came to know of South India from the stories I heard of her travels. So I have been traveling all my life, and then I've spent many years in corporate world, working with the biggest FMCG companies and the biggest IT companies in the world. And around and across the world. But my blog happened in 2004 absolutely as an experiment when I used to live in Bangalore, and it was just a new toy to play around with. What do you write? I used to travel on the weekends, and I started writing about my travels, and that's how it built on. So I really didn't plan it out. 2004, nobody knew where blogging would end up. Will it survive or not survive? Will it be one of those experiments of the IT world which will come and go, like so many platforms we've seen come and go? So there was no visibility into the future, how it will turn up. It's about 5-6 years back, or maybe 8 years back, that the industry started looking at bloggers as partners, or it became a commercially viable option for people to step in. So now people who are stepping it now are stepping in with an intention to make a career out of it. I didn't step in to make a career out of it. I started as an experiment, and I owe it to the readers who would read and then give me back lot more information about the places they were, and they come visit our place, come visit this place, come visit that place. Or if I was traveling somewhere, they'll tell me, you see this also, you see this also. And they know me so well that they will tell me that, you would like this, so please go there. Don't go here, go there, kind of thing. So that's how it built. So I didn't quit to become a blogger, because when I quit in 2007. I quit because I was doing consulting in business innovation. That's what I have written a book about, which you can see right here. And and so business innovation is something that I write about, consult in, and study. So travel blog was actually a hobby which turned into a semi-professional kind of but today I know it's one of my biggest identities.
Fantastic. Karan, I have to come to you with the same question. How did your journey with travel begin?
Yeah, thinking about it, I think I was in Accenture as an IT professional, and I was into cycling. One day I see a place that was called Ladakh, and I set my mind to cycle over there. And the company said, okay, I can't give you any day off. So I quit the company and started cycling from Bangalore.
Wow.
And when me and a few other friends, we landed up there, it was a completely new place as an Indian for myself to experience that place. I couldn't understand the language. I couldn't understand the culture there, and I wanted to know more. Like I was very curious to understand what they are, how they think, what they say. That's when even my friends, they realized that okay, we must start something like a small travel initiative where we give information to tourists about each place. That's how Go Mowgli started. We just wanted it to be a travel information center, and it eventually turned out to be a backpacking tour company for us.
Right. Yeah, and you started in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. How has travel itself evolved? How has cultural travel itself evolved in that time? So if I understand correctly, I think you guys were targeting foreign tourists and NRIs initially, right?
Yes.
How did that evolve, and what do you see that has changed in 2020?
I don't see. Of course, there are much changes that will. There are a lot of changes, but in India, the culture changes. I think every 20 kilometers, and every day, even we discover something new in each place.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what it is. But culture-wise, it's getting digitized. People are getting more info of each places. There are more options for new places to travel. People are discovering those things. But culturally, I think it's still the same. India is still the same.
Okay. So even
Not
with
in the cities, but in the smaller cities.
Right.
That's right.
Right. So even with the whole Instagram generation as such, I mean, the Instagram selfie generation, I mean, do they think about travel differently?
I think until 2016, we only had foreign travelers who were traveling with us because they were looking for experience and culture. And slowly the trend started as the social media started to pick up. These young travelers, they just want to experience these parts also. We were so glad to see Indians traveling to these smaller places and doing the tours with us. So I think in a way they are getting there. They want experience as well.
Right, right. So, Anuradha ji, I want to pick up on something that Karan mentioned, which is when we speak of India, we can't really talk about it as a monolith. Our cultures are so different, right? So every 20, 30 miles out of a city, I mean, different cultures will emerge. How do you compare travel experience across the length and breadth of the country?
Okay, so I would say not even 20 miles. Even within a big city, you'll find multiple cultures coexisting. Multiple layers in a temporal way coexisting, which means something from 5,000-year-old, something from 2,000-year-old, something from 500-year-old, something 100-year-old, something 10-year-old coexisting. Then culturally, different. India has always been a traveler's country. People from one place would migrate to another place, settle down there. In our recent generation, we've seen a lot of, let's say, North India migrating to places like Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, because the opportunities were there. In the past, if you look at the bureaucrat circle, you would see that a lot of South Indians have moved to North India. And when people move, they take their culture along and they create a mini version of their own world there. And over a period of time, there is some mishmash happens and, something new comes up. While on the outward, there are a lot of differences that we see, differences in food, which in my opinion come primarily from the weather, depending on what kind of weather you are in. For example, in North, we end up eating a lot of ghee-based stuff in winters. But when you live in South, you don't feel like looking at it because the weather doesn't really permit that. Clothing, again, is pretty much climate driven. But if you look at inherently, everybody in India wore only cottons and silks. And, the prints changed. The techniques changed, the weaves changed, but the fabric remained more or less the same. Similarly, the cultures, there is an inherent commonality across all the cultures.
Right.
So be it in the kind of festivals that we celebrate, be it in the kind of cycles that we follow, the yearly cycles that we follow. So if, let's say Navratri, it is celebrated in every culture in India, every culture. It's celebrated a little differently. The deity remains the same, the dates remain the same, but the way it is celebrated changes according to the place you are in. So that's the crux of, so there are the base common principle concepts remain the same, but the expression of it changes with the place. So if you understand that, then you know that, then you understand the phrase unity in diversity.
Right. So, Karan, you focus exclusively on South India. What are some distinct travel experiences in the South?
Travel experiences, I think every day we come across so many things. I'm just trying to point out few of them.
Right. Hampi, for example.
Hampi, yeah, they call it the Flintstone village.
Right.
Because of the stones and boulders all across. But looking at as an experience, I would start from Kerala. The people over there are so different from what you actually see anywhere else in South India. The food and the culture over there.
So what are some distinct travel experiences that you've experienced in North and East and West and South?
Okay, so let me talk about something from Central India. There is this tribal festival called Bhagoria.
Okay.
It happens in Western Madhya Pradesh, close to the borders with Gujarat. There's a tribe called Bhil that lives there in the villages. And they have this holy time festival. Again, holy time is one time where across India you have some festival. It's called by different names. It's celebrated in a different way, but that's the time when almost everybody has a festival. So Bhil tribals have this Bhagoria Haat, in which they have a huge mela, a huge fair, and a unique festival. It's very unique because this is when young boys and girls propose to each other. publicly. And they actually run away and get married, and they come back only when their families agree to get them married. And there are small little rituals that they use to propose, which are age old, but they're still followed. I thought this was really, really unique. When I come to Goa, which is the place which I currently live in, there is an ancient festival called Chikil Now, Chikil is literally means playing in the mud. And I think it's one of the world's oldest mud festival. There's a village called Marshall in which on a particular day during monsoons, I think it falls somewhere around July, all the men in the village, right from toddlers to, the veterans, they all play in the mud, and they all play the same games that Krishna used to play in Mathura Vrindavan, in Gokul. Okay, and they all play in the mud, and all the women stand by and they distribute food, home cooked food. It's a temple festival, so it happens in the grounds of a temple, and it's completely unique. I haven't seen anything like this anywhere in the country or heard of it. So these are some of the experiences.
Okay, it's very interesting because the Soliga tribes in BR Hills, Beligeti Rangana Betta in
Right.
Karnataka,
Yes.
they have a very similar ritual. So what happens, every year there is a tree, it's the Champaka tree.
Mm-hmm.
Under that, they have a roti festival. So they put a huge bonfire and they roast ragi rotis, rotis made out of millets. And men dance around the fire.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a matchmaking festival.
Wow.
And the women, they sit around,
Mm-hmm.
and if they like a man, they throw 3 stones at the same guy. And if that happens, okay, let's say they throw very small pebbles, okay, and then he comes back and he says, okay, why were you? It's actually hitting on me. Okay, and then then she says, yeah. And then she says, okay, I like you. And they run away into the forest for 7 days. So in 7 days, it is the boy's duty to take care of her with all the things that are there in the forest. They're really, really good with what they know in the forest.
Yes.
So they survive for 7 days. They come back. Then they come back to the senior in the village and say, sorry, we ran away, and then they get married. Of course, there is a...
I didn't know. What time of the year does it happen?
Usually September, October.
Oh, so it should be, just check if it happens during Sharad Purnima.
Okay.
The full moon night of...
yes.
Right?
Full moon
I'll tell
night,
you, there is
for
another
sure.
reason, because that day is celebrated in a lot of cultures. There's a tradition of keeping food out in the night, during the night time, especially milk.
Okay.
Or milk products, kheer or anything which is made of milk. So you keep it out in the moonlight, and then you consume. And I recently, my lockdown project was to learn astrology, and I figured out that that is the day when the moon is closest to the earth, and the moon rays actually. It's like immunity booster. The moon rays actually not purify, but they give some kind of immunity boosting to the food. So when you consume it, you actually get better immunity.
Wow. That's great.
So I have observed that in Goa with some of our friends, that we keep the milk out in the open on that moonlit night. It's something to do with Ashwin Nakshatra, when the moon is in Ashwin Nakshatra. So it's the Sharad Purnima day. So if the food is involved in night, and this is usually Sharad Purnima.
Interesting.
Man, there's so many similarities across the nation, right? Similar rituals and so on.
Absolutely.
Karan, coming back to you, some distinct experiences in the south itself. You guys curate tours in Karnataka, Kerala, and Goa. So maybe you could talk about a few of them.
One of the experiences was we randomly entered one of the Kerala villages as we were doing a recce, and we found out this is like a bunch of families who are making mirrors there. out of metal. They are called Aranmula Kannadi.
Yes.
Right.
It's not at all the mirror that we use. It's actually metal that they polish it so well, and they give it as a gift to the brides.
Yes.
And
Okay.
since that was very, very interesting. And that's what I said. I would start from the bottom. There are so many other experiences.
Right.
When we came a little higher up near Alleppey, we found, of course, we read about it, but when we see it, it's crazy how the snake boat races go on. There are like 112 people sitting on one boat. And then there are another 5 drummers who will be, they are like the cheer boys for them.
Okay.
It's incredible to look at them. So yeah, there are so many experiences, Roshan. I wish I had the whole time to explain, give you all those data.
In fact, I saw this snake boat race last year, and then I did a lot of reading. I'm now reading a lot of scriptures to dig out histories of a lot of these things. And I figured out this snake boat race actually is like the water festival of the temples. They used to be a part of the water festivals of the temples when they would take the deities out and take them out for a boat ride, and then there were these competitions going on, and there were wars fought on these boats.
Oh, okay.
Literally, there are anecdotes of wars being fought on these boats.
Right. Right. So, Karan, you also.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you also. I want to check. You also organize city tours as well, right? So, what is that experience like?
City tours, we usually try to do off the beaten path. Even in the city, we'll try to take you to the places which are not famous at all. In, let's say, in Mysore or Srirangpatna or any other place. And in these tours, we try to connect the history, and also sometimes it's fascinating when we see that, okay, Srirangpatna is connected to Boston Tea Party or the French Revolution. And when everything comes together, it's a mind-blowing story for us and for the tourists also.
Right. So, Anuradhaji, what are some of your must-travel destinations that people should have on their bucket list?
I can never answer that question. That's absolutely. I always say somebody who's seen 5 places can say best 5 places. Somebody who's been to 5,000 places will never be able to say which are the 5 places. And over a time with my traveling, I figured out that you can throw me anywhere and I'll find some stories there. So that's a knack you develop over a period of time, and I'm sure Karan will agree to that.
True.
So I
okay, let's talk about 3 of your recent favorites. Shall we put it that way?
I don't have favorites. Let me talk about the recent travels. They now seem very nostalgic, given that I haven't traveled in the last 5-6 months. So my last big trip was to Odisha. So of course we know about the magnificent temples there, and we know about the food there, which is very, very popular. But what I discovered was a birding heaven. We went to Bhitarkanika National Park, where we found saltwater crocodiles, which are not very common. Most crocodiles that we see are sweetwater crocodiles. We found some rare birds like brown-winged kingfishers. Then we went to a place called Mangala Jodi, which is on the edges of Chilka Lake. And if you love birding, you have to go there. You go on these narrow boat rides in the shallow waters, and all you see is birds and birds and birds. So that was my second last, big travel before the lockdown.
Okay.
So I would say if you have to pick up 3, then whichever part of India you are in. So if you are in South, choose one in North, one in East, one in West. If you are, so depending on where you are, you choose 2 or 3 destinations. If you want to read about them, come to InDetails. We've literally written about most of them, and now we are actually inviting people to contribute to them.
Fantastic.
Go. But
let me
the way to choose. So depending on what time of the year you are going, you can choose some of the festivals, because at any point in time, some festivals are on. You know, you can look at the nature, and you must look at the water bodies. You know, India is a very, very, it's a country which is full of water bodies, be it a river, be it a lake, be it step wells, be it ponds, and all of them have a story, all of them. So most rivers would have a story. I think Bangalore is the only big city in this country which is not on the banks of a river, or which doesn't have a river flowing through it. Most other places, the smallest of villages, have a river flowing through them. So if you walk on the banks of the river, you will probably be walking on in the most ancient parts of that city.
Right, right. And so I actually was going to ask you around that. So there's a certain seasonality to places as well, right? So you know, for example, I mean, you visit, let's say, a certain place in summer, a certain place in, you know, for a particular a festival or whatever. So, you know, any recommendations on that?
So again, it's person dependent. If you like people, if you like a lot of people, if you want to see Rath Yatra, you have to go during Rath Yatra. But I have visited places in absolute contrast. For example, when I visited Ladakh in first week of January, it was an absolutely different experience than visiting it in June. In June, it's like a marketplace of Delhi. You know, almost everybody's there. It has traffic jams, and if it has, you know, crowd, and, you know, you can hear all possible languages. But when you go there in January, you see half frozen rivers, you see frozen waterfalls. There are hardly any people, so anybody who's there is willing to talk to you. Yes, you have to stay indoors and you have to wear a lot of layers, but it's an entirely different experience. I think I did one trip during monsoons in Rajasthan, and Rajasthan is typically closed from April to till about October. But when you visit during monsoons, you see a different, you know, monsoons are very different in desert than they are in, let's say, the Western Ghats.
Right.
So choose as you wish, but sometimes going off season can give you a very different perspective, and of course, crowd-free places.
Right. And any festivals that you would pick out from, you know, the various travels that you've made?
I would say you must see one Kumbh Mela in your life.
Right.
At least one Kumbh Mela. There are about six of them happening in a span of 12 years. So make sure, because that's the kind of cultural experience which is very difficult to put in words. It is as close to utopia as it can be. And it's an experience that brings the whole of humanity, and it brings a different version of people there.
Right.
I've written extensively about it.
Yeah.
You know, people behave themselves. You know, we in our normal day-to-day life, we keep telling we need to behave. We need to behave in so many different ways. Not keep our cities clean. You know, not pollute. Not do this. Be polite. You know, be respectful. Be trusting. Be trustworthy. So all of that comes together in a Kumbh Mela.
Right. Right.
People simply behave themselves. It's a very, very different ambience that you have to experience once. So that's my one recommendation.
Okay. Karan, same question to you. Some travel experiences that should be a must do for our listeners.
I think there are quite a lot of cultural cultural festivals that go on in Thrissur, in northern Kerala. They are very, very, very interesting. The way they are decked up. It's not just Kathakali, there are Tevams and other different intricate art they do. And those festivals will be one of my choices for anyone to.
Right. What months would you recommend? I mean, these and...
These are usually in the months of March, April, May. I think these guys plan out festivals according to their agrarian culture, when they are done with their paddy cultivation and harvest. So March, April, May would be a great time. It's pretty hot though, but
Okay.
it's worth the visit to Kerala that time.
Right, right. So another question that I wanted to ask the both of you, and maybe we can begin with you, Anuradha ji, is that, I mean, we spoke about earlier as well, how we need to do a lot more to showcase our culture and so on through travel, right? And this becomes especially obvious to anyone when they travel abroad and they see that, things that are a few hundred years old are, marketed in such a way that it has a whole ecosystem around it, right? And a thriving ecosystem around it, especially like whether it's places in Europe or the US. What can the government do to kind of encourage these sort of ecosystems, travel ecosystems in India?
There is a lot that government can do. It can be a complete book in itself, what government can do. But if I have to pick up 2, 3, 4 things, government has to promote proactively entrepreneurship in tourism sector. When I say this is one of the few sectors, maybe the only sector where you really don't need any kind of education or training. You can, right from a tea, setting up a tea shop, which may sound very derogatory, but tea shops make a lot of money, with least possible investment, to setting up something which could be virtual reality. That's the range which you can operate. Unfortunately, most professionals in the tourism space are still not thinking beyond selling flight tickets and hotel rooms. Most of them are not thinking. They are not thinking of creating experiences. So if you create 10 experiences, maybe 8 of them will fail. But the 2 of them, if you create new, something that's not done anywhere else in the world, that will be your USP. And I can list at least 1,000 such experiences that can be created and curated. But unfortunately, my interactions with the industry, I found no takers for them. People are simply, most people, when they know that I'm not a travel agent, most of them, they say, are you going to sell my rooms? If you're going to sell my rooms, let's talk. Otherwise, okay, nice meeting you. So it has never gone beyond that. I have worked so much with so many tourism boards in India, outside India, so many hospitality brands in India, outside India, airlines, anything, anybody who has anything to do with travel. But at no time people have come back to me and said, help us create this. Even when I've suggested them, they've been, they're just copy pasting a model that is working elsewhere. So we have to get out of this copy-paste model and realize that there are inherent strengths in every destination. We must figure that out, market it, and leverage it.
Right.
The government is just too focused on creating hard infrastructure. Yes, that's needed, but the soft infrastructure is completely missing.
Right. Right. On another note, why do you think there is, not much of a museum or a gallery kind of a culture here in India?
Because there's nobody to explain.
Yeah.
One, our government museums are definitely not best displayed. They have the best of artifacts to show, but they are not well displayed. The lighting is bad. You can't take pictures. You can't do anything. But the worst thing is you can't show me a statue and then expect me to appreciate it. Somebody has to explain it to me. People are not art history graduates, or people are not, even if they are art history graduates, they don't know the whole spectrum of art that exists. Right. As for example, National Museum in Delhi has a beautiful gallery on miniature arts from across India, right from Pahadi miniature to Deccan miniature, everything beautiful. But unless somebody explains you, it is like, yeah, nice paintings. You can't do anything much, and that's a career opportunity for so many guides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't take too much to learn about them. So that's why museums fail.
Right. So Karan, Anuradha ji has generously listed out 4 or 5 business opportunities
Which we
that
can get it.
yeah, that Gomogli can try, right?
Yeah,
But I
definitely.
want your perspective on this as well. I mean, you have been in this for 7-8 years now, right?
Yes.
What do you think the government can do to encourage travel and tourism?
As Anuradha ji pointed it out, it's. I think she has been very vocal about it. She's told everything that's possible that can be done by government. But few things like we need some aggressive marketing strategies to bring inbound tourists to India also. You know, uh, right now I think if you this is just an example. Again, I'm going back to Kerala. If you open any other travel agent website outside India, they have different countries, but instead of India, they have Kerala directly in that drop down
Mhm.
list.
Right.
It's that good they have been marketing. If they can
Yes.
follow that at least and put it
Mhm.
up everywhere,
Mhm.
they can figure it out. I would say. I think that's
Yeah.
one. We need access points. Like there are really nice places in the Northeast. Uh, People cannot reach out to those places. Not just Northeast. Anywhere in India, there are so many beautiful places.
Mhm.
Building better access points would help, and also I don't know how I can put this up, but it's like you're asking a person who doesn't use a gun to make a safety lock for it. So we have people who don't know about tourism, but they are leading tourism. That I mean, that's the gap that is there.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, I want to ask you guys about the Northeast itself. Again, another part of India that is, so beautiful. In fact, it was one of my last trips before this whole COVID thing happened. In fact, I was there in February, right? I
Okay.
visited the Makamakya temple, which was a fantastic experience, and then, went to some other places as well. Any of you have stories from the Seven Sister States?
Yes, I have been to, I've not been to 4 of them, but yeah, rest of them. So I think Sikkim is doing very well. I love Sikkim. Uh, they have turned their state completely organic. They they've at least created circuits very well. And if you go and if you live in Gangtok, which is pretty much your base, if you're exploring Sikkim, it's one of the most walkable cities in the country. You can literally walk up and down the place. You have bookstores thriving there. You have, gardens, and you have Buddhist stupas, and you have good hotels. You have mid-range hotels. You have everything. So I think Sikkim is doing very well, and they're getting the kind of traffic the kind and amount of traffic they can manage, which is good for the state. They're not getting into over tourism. Uh, the rest of them, I think they have all started opening up to tourism. Uh, Shillong is doing pretty well. Meghalaya is doing pretty well. Assam can do better. Arunachal is very aggressively promoting itself. Last three,
Now,
4 years, they have been very aggressive in their promotions.
Yeah.
Nagaland has created a beautiful Hornbill festival, which kind of brings the world to Nagaland for about 15 days. The rest of the 3-4 states are catching up. So I would say they are getting there, like Karan says, access remains a problem. It's far costlier for me to fly to any place in Northeast than fly to a Thailand or a Singapore.
exactly.
But and the infrastructure could be better, but I would say infrastructure is always a catch-up game. When the tourists start reaching there, the infrastructure will come up. So I'm not too worried about infrastructure not being there. It comes up. When people see people coming, they will open up their homes. They will open up lodges, and they will open up things. So I think they're getting there. It's not that they may be out. They may not be occupying our mind space like a Goa does or a Kerala does, but it need not. Believe me, both Kerala and Goa are suffering from over tourism, and Manali. These are places that are literally suffering from over tourism.
Right.
If you live in Goa, you know how much the locals hate the tourists. I mean,
Right.
they say so because it's impacting their culture.
Yeah.
So there has to be a balance also.
Yeah. So Karan and I are from Coorg, and we have a shared experience as well, right? So the number of homestays in Coorg, for example, has mushroomed like crazy
Right.
over the last 5-6 years. And there is this aspect of food tourism, right? Where mentioning Coorg, the whole traditional pandikari and baimbada
Kadambuttu.
and
Yeah.
exact kadambuttu and stuff like that, right? So, any food experiences that stand out for you guys? I mean, any must try food experiences?
My top food experience is always street food. I'm a vegetarian, so I
Okay.
am limited to vegetarian. So if you must experience two things. One is the local thali. Wherever you are, you must explore the local thali. So you get everything in one plate. You get the taste of that region, and every region has a thali. And second is street food.
Right.
Wherever you are, have the street food.
Okay. So
I'm
have you
not
been to?
too much of a promoter of the new age eateries where it's good to experiment, but you can't have that food on a sustainable basis.
Right. Yeah. So we've been planning an Indore food trail actually for a while. I mean, I've heard that Indori chaat is
Night market, yeah.
yeah. So something
In
to
fact,
look
Bangalore
at.
has a beautiful night
Bangalore
market.
has one. Yeah.
Bangalore
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so it has Food Street
Ahmedabad
in
has one.
Vivipuram and yeah, correct. So, one of the things that I want to discuss also is entrepreneurship within the travel industry as such. So there are various stakeholders, right? Bloggers, travel guides, shops, hotels. So, Karan, from 2013, what are some of the businesses that you're seeing come up in the travel and tourism sector as such? Something new that has started up.
When we started up, we didn't have any hostels to accommodate cheap, what do you call, shoestring travelers, but in a very clean places. But
Right.
with time, I think in 2 years, from 2013 to 2015-16, we had a lot of small, very decent, very clean hostels popping out. That was a
Right.
really, really nice thing for all the backpackers who were traveling around. That was nice. And slowly, I think people have started speaking more of English in places where people are traveling. That is a cultural difference that we see with time, what I've been seeing.
Okay.
And then people are slowly getting into virtual tourism, like the Oculus.
Oh,
What do you call it?
okay.
Yeah. So they just want to get in there and they want to portray the previous past of the place and give you a story of that, taking content from us and building those graphics into it. So these are quite fascinating to see.
Fantastic. Right. So, okay, my final question is, this year has been pretty exceptional for all of us, right? I mean, we've been cooped up in our houses, and over the last 45 minutes, we've given people plenty of ideas, right, on where they can go, what they can experience, and so on. Question to both of you: how do you see travel and tourism coming back post-COVID? Maybe we can, begin with you, Anuradha ji.
So I wrote a story on this, and I hope that this need for social distancing and the need for hygiene will take care of a lot of issues of over tourism. And I hope that the authorities seriously take this as an opportunity to spread out our tourism network, so that the tourists have an option to go in 10 different places instead of one place. But that's at a policy level. If people are willing to, work on and say that no, all of you need not rush to Goa. There is a long beach belt which starts from Maharashtra to Kerala, which is the same beaches, with pretty much the same culture. So you can spread yourself out. That's my hope. I don't know if that will happen. I think tourism, leisure tourism will take a lot of time to come back. I would not be surprised if we see almost zero leisure tourism for next 1 year. I mean, I may sound very pessimistic, but you see, a lot of factors. people, maybe not in Bangalore technology sector, but in most other sectors, people have lost revenue, salaries. And leisure tourism is one of the last expenses people do. It's not one of the first expenses that people do. So maybe people in Bangalore will continue to travel, but most of the other places, I don't see that happening. Second, there is a fear. There is a fear that if another pandemic or another bout of pandemic breaks out, and if we get stuck in that place, and now with all initially people would have taken care of you, local governments, but today nobody's going to take care of you. You may not have means to come back to your home. And, so there is a whole lot of fear around. So leisure travel, I don't see. Business travel will resume. Maybe some bit of staycations will happen. But there is, if you look at the overall working population and see how many people can take staycations, a very small percentage.
Yeah. No, that's actually definitely an interesting trend. I know few folks in my circle itself who are planning to work out of Goa for the next few months and so on, right? Because if the place doesn't really matter, then everyone's sensing a little bit of a fatigue. It's the end of the year, so they might as well take off to a beach or a hill station or wherever and work out of there. But yeah, I mean, as you said, it's going to be few and far in between.
A lot of people in our circle may see this because we can afford to do it, but most people are tied to a place when it comes to their work.
Right. So Karan, what is the one place you're going to go to after this whole COVID situation eases?
I think directly I'll go to Ladakh again.
Oh, okay.
I have many fond memories there.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and also, I think thinking about COVID situation, there is one new technology which I think may be implemented, which might work really well. It's called the known traveler digital identity.
Okay.
So it's a mishmash of cryptography, blockchain, and biometrics. So each person is tracked with that, so you don't have to get a passport. Right now, Netherlands and Canada is trying on that. So you don't have passports or anything, it's just a thumbprint. But it will also make sure we know where this person is going. And if the pandemic again spreads, we at least know where to contain it. I just hope that picks up.
I think it's a great opportunity for domestic tourism because international travel is going to be difficult. So next 1 to 2 years, it's a great opportunity for India to do domestic tourism.
Yeah. So, all right. Thank you so much, Anuradha ji and Karan. That's a fantastic note to end the podcast on. As I said, I mean, you guys have given a virtual tour for our audience who've probably been cooped up at homes, right? So, let's hope and pray that things get back to normal soon enough and we can all step out and enjoy India, right? So thank you, Anuradha ji. Thank you, Karan, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan,
so much.
for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by the team at Bharat Varta. If you liked this podcast, then don't forget to share, subscribe, and rate us on your favorite platforms. We're available on Anchor, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, YouTube, and a host of other platforms. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you do wish to offer us any feedback on the content or anything else, do reach out to us on social media or get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.